We have done nearly 290 of these webinars, 90 minutes on an average each, 3 to 4 speakers per webinar. We have been very fortunate to have a blend of Indian speakers, Indian foreign speakers, foreign speakers. We have also had the good luck of hosting 5 Nobel laureates. By the way, when we were through this webinar series, I could easily see some of the speakers who came are potential Nobel laureates. You could see the quality and in depth of research, the rigor that they brought in and the topics that they touched. So that way we feel very fortunate. Under the G20 presidency also, we were very lucky. We did about 21 webinars. We did 11 on new international economic order. Little did we know that all those webinars will become so important in the current context. We did on climate, we did on women, 6 on climate, 5 on women. And after November 2024, we have done 6 webinars on Trump and tariffs. And each of these webinars extremely relevant. Today, we have heard the Prime Minister speak from the ramparts of the Red Fort for nearly 100 minutes. As economists, I think we're very lucky. The Prime Minister, like he gave the army a absolutely open-ended permission to go and do whatever they want, whatever target they want, I think he's given the economist a similar open-ended thing. He wants a Viksit Bharat. He has told us that. And in the speech today, you could see various aspects of Viksit Bharat he has spoken about. Little did I know when we set up this date of our topic today that he would cover so extensively, and ours will only be a supplement to what speech that he has delivered in the morning from the ramparts of Red Fort. At the end of the day, it is all about economic growth. There are many skeptics who say, can we really grow at 9%? I simply remind them, Korea could grow from 62 to 89 at 8%. World was no less volatile at that time. If China could grow from 1980 to 2012 at 10% on an average, the world was no less volatile even then. And today, if the type of resolve which the Prime Minister of the country, the political authority of the country is showing, and spending so much time talking about Viksit Bharat, setting up a task force, looking at the demographics, talking about the youth, talking about female labor force participation, agriculture and Kisan, what all, what not. I think we economists have to rise to the occasion now. So, well, none of us knew what his speech is going to be, but we thought on 15th of August, with only 22 more years to go for Viksit Bharat, each one of us, Indian economic associations, trade bodies, professors, each one of us have a role to play. So we approached Professor Mahendra, one of us, who's now at the coveted Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, chairing that. We approached him and modest and humble that he readily agreed and he said, though it's an important national day, he will make it. And I'm so happy that he agreed to do it. Then my next task was to have people from across the country, and not too many to have a crowd and not too less so that it's not representative. And I'm very lucky and proud to say we approached the 3 panelists. They're in front of you. Professor Verma, Professor D.K. Srivastava, and then Professor Chaudhuri, Ajitava Chaudhuri, and 3 of them agreed. It's also a very good day for us because on this day, and Professor Mahendra is going to release the book, we realized that Professor Srivastava has just completed this. It's so beautiful a book. think each one of us should read it. People at my age will remember every day of their life that they have lived so far, and people younger than me would know the type of things that happened in not too distant past. And Professor Mahendra Dev will talk about this book in much more detail. Actually, the chair and the speakers today need no introduction. Professor Mahendra Dev is at the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and we have all read about him. We all know about him. He has had a long stint in public policy. He has been the director of IGIDR. He has been also with the EPW. So I think we are just fortunate to have him here. Dr. Srivastava is the Chief Policy Advisor EY and an honorary professor, Madras School of Economics. He has been speaking here earlier also. He has been associated extensively with the finance commissions. Professor Verma is the former chair professor at Grit Chandigarh, where he has served for nearly 10 years. And before that, he was in Amritsar at the Guru Nanak Dev University and working extensively in various aspects of the economic field. He has worked on rural credit, agriculture finance, institutional development. Our last speaker for the day is Professor Ajitava Raychaudhuri, and he is currently the Professor Emeritus and Head Economics Department at Adamas University. He retired as professor and former head and coordinator of Center for Advanced Studies, Department of Economics, as well as former dean, Faculty of Arts of Jadavpur University, Calcutta, India. Now, with this brief introduction of very well-known professors, I think the best way to celebrate 15th August for economists is to discuss about our economy, past, present, and future. With that, I hand over the session to the chair, Professor Mahendra Dev, to take the proceedings further. Professor.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Charan Singh, for your kind words. At the outset, I thank EGROW for inviting me to this important webinar on India growth story, past, present, and future. So it's a coincidence that we are speaking on this topic on our Independence Day. Happy Independence Day to all of you. There is also another coincidence that one of the panelists, as mentioned earlier, Dr. D.K. Srivastava, with three of his colleagues, Murali Krishna Bharadwaj, Tarun Kapoor, and Ragini Trehan, has written a book entitled India's Growth Narrative, Performance and Potential, 1950-51 to 2050 to 51. So I'll take just 1 minute to release the book. This is the book. So I'll just release it. So this is the one.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Great occasion.
Yeah. So this, it's a very good book giving a narrative of 100 years of growth. So it's like our webinar. It's about past, present, and future of India's growth. And it has about 9 chapters. And starting from even before independence, we had share of GDP almost 20% in earlier. So in the end, it says restoring India's past economic glory. That's the 8th chapter. So it ends with the 2050-51. And another important thing is that it also says the Hindu rate of growth, which one of my professors, Raj Krishna, said 3.5%. They said that actually Hindu rate of growth is 7%, almost double to that thing. And it is consistent with saving and investment rates prescribed in India's ancient texts, where savings and investment were higher. So this is, I won't go into the details. We are going to have a webinar on 10th October. So this is about the book. So turning to the webinar, as mentioned by Dr. Charan Singh, we have very distinguished panel, Dr. D.K. Srivastava, Dr. Satish Verma, Professor Ajitava Raychaudhuri. Before inviting them to speak, I'll say a few words on the topic. So regarding past, as you know, policies at the time of independence by Jawaharlal Nehru and Congress and many others were influenced by the socialistic ideas. So first 3 decades, we had protection policies, more state involvement, public sector dominated. Also, Mahalanobis model preferred heavy industry focus, and employment, primary education, etc. were not given that much importance. Of course, we had some achievements like big irrigation projects, science and technology, push to higher education like IITs, green revolution in agriculture. However, growth was low. Labor-intensive manufacturing was not undertaken. So in the first 3 decades of independence, we had this average growth rate of 3.5%. So by the end of 1970s, many countries, particularly in the East and Southeast Asia, including China, introduced economic reforms. Of course, India introduced economic reforms in 1991, but we are late by almost 15 years. So due to balance of payments crisis, certain major policy reforms were introduced on industrial, trade, and public sector fronts. So the reforms aimed at fundamental shift towards greater reliance on the market mechanism. In fact, Dr. Manmohan Singh, in his first budget speech, quoting Victor Hugo, I quote, "No power on earth can stop this an idea whose time had come," unquote. In the last 3 decades after reforms, we had an average growth rate of 6 to 6.5% per annum. Of course, growth rate differs from one decade to another depending on the shocks. In the last, after the reforms, we had financial crisis in 2008, taper tantrum in 2013, NBFC crisis in 2018, COVID in 2020 and 2021. But we have overcome all these shocks, and Indian economy is resilient and continues to be the fastest growing country among large economies. So the country is on its way to becoming the 4th largest economy in the world at the end of FY26. India's real GDP grew at 7.8% per annum in the post-COVID 3 years, FY23 to 25. It was the average growth was 7.8. Of course, this year RBI projects GDP growth about 6.5. Of course, we have another shock now in the form of tariffs of 50% imposed by the US. In the last several decades, we had good economic and non-economic relations with the US. Apart from goods, we also export services to the US. So best thing is to continue negotiations with the US and diversify our export markets to other countries in Asia, Latin America, Europe, Africa, and all. So some estimates show reduction in growth due to US tariffs, but it's of course not still finalized. But there are many domestic tailwinds, such as low inflation, rate cuts, and CRR cut by RBI, expected good monsoon, measures in the last budget like capital expenditure, and also last budget as tax reduction. So these tailwinds may raise both rural and urban demand by raising both investment, consumption, and some push to exports. So India's medium-term growth prospects seems to be robust with sound fiscal management. In fact, yesterday the rating agency S&P raised India's credit rating to BBB after 18 years. It's a good sign for Indian economy. So I'm optimistic we will also overcome the shock of tariffs and continue our higher growth. Turning to the future, India is aspiring to become a developed country status in terms of per capita income by 2047. So there are some estimates of projected nominal growth of 11 to 12% and real growth rates of 7 to 8% to achieve this goal. I mean, Dr. Rangarajan, Dr. Srivastava, Economic Survey and all, they have given projections, 7 to 8%. So India has potential to achieve these growth rates. It has to increase GDP from the present $4 trillion economy to $30 trillion economy by 2047, and almost 7.5 to 8 times we have to increase GDP. So what are the sources of growth? We can achieve these things. Of course, investment and exports are the two engines of growth. Some increase in investment is needed, investment rate, including domestic, foreign private investment, and also efficiency in capital use and enhancement of total factor productivity will boost growth. Of course, rise in savings in the economy is important. Otherwise, you can't have money for investments. And also structural transformation of economy in output and employment from agriculture to manufacturing and services, because still agriculture has 46% of workforce. And India is doing well in service exports. There are significant opportunities for manufacturing growth and exports. And also some other sources apart from these are India's fast-growing young workforce, rise in human capital, fast-growing digital technology and AI, including AI. We all know that young population with a median age of around 28 years compared to the aging population of developed and other countries is another key driver of economic growth for India. Also, increasing urbanization will need more urban infrastructure and it will improve growth. As mentioned earlier, increasing women's labor force participation rates and empowerment will also raise India's GDP. So we take this opportunity of tariff shocks and concentrate on domestic growth and undertake reforms apart from, of course, exports. Today, as mentioned by Dr. Charan Singh, today the Prime Minister from the Red Fort also mentioned about Atmanirbhar Bharat and increase in domestic economic growth. He also made some important announcements like GST reforms and also 1 lakh crore on employment. So we have undertaken product market reforms in 1991. Now we also need factor market reforms, particularly land and labor for manufacturing growth. Of course, the Prime Minister also mentioned we need deregulation and also improve ease of doing business. But in achieving high growth rates for India, states play an important role in reforms. It's a healthy sign that states are competing by announcing goals on GDP and GDP per capita. In fact, many studies have shown that improving state capacity and governance is important in raising incomes of people and also delivering public services like health and education. Similarly, decentralization of resources to panchayats and municipal councils also is needed, because some studies show that we only give funds about 3% to the councils, local councils, whereas other countries give almost 30 to 40%. So to conclude, I am optimistic that we'll become Viksit Bharat by 2047. Thank you very much. So now I invite Dr. D.K. Srivastava to speak.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mahendra, Professor Satish Verma, Professor Raychaudhuri, and Professor Charan Singh. Let me begin by congratulating Professor Charan Singh and thanking him for choosing such a vital theme and such an auspicious day for undertaking this panel discussion, and also for assembling such a great panel headed with Professor Mahendra in chair He's a leading economist and definitely the leading policy maker in the country at the moment. We have an eminent set of co-panelists that I have, and it is wonderful, therefore, to participate. It is a privilege to participate in such a vital discussion. Now, as far as the topic is concerned, it is about India's growth story. And this story in the past goes long back. In the future, it will go in an uncertain and long future. And in the present, it is at the moment an exciting configuration of forces that India is facing. In this long story, I am going to focus on 100 years, 75 years of the past and 25 years of the future. Now, to do so in about 18 to 20 minutes, I am going to abstract and focus on the key characters and the key events, the core events and the key characters that played very important role in the evolution of India's economy. If I were to say, growth rate is actually a handmaiden of the savings rate and the investment rate, which together, when they interact with the incremental capital output ratio, convert that saving rate into investment rate and thereby growth rate. Therefore, I'm going to focus on the march of the saving rate and investment rate in the economy. And we notice that over this period of 75 years in the past, one major change has occurred almost in a linear way. That is, in the early 50s, we had an average saving rate of about 11%. Today, it is 33%. The saving rate has tripled in this period of 75 years. At the same time, if we focus on trend growth rates, in the 50s, we had growth rate of 4% on average, and today it is in the range of 6 to 6.5%. So whereas the saving rate has tripled, the growth rate has not tripled, it has not even doubled. It is about 1.5 times more. And we need to therefore undertake this review of the past to unravel why growth did not reflect the same kind of rise as in the saving rate. Now, in order to unravel that, we have divided this 75-year history into 6 distinct phases. Now, the first phase, we have chosen their names also, in our view, carefully, although both the periods and the names could be different also. But in our view, that first period could be called a colonial legacy phase. We had just a saving rate of 11%, that is nearly 90% of the economy, of the income was being spent on consumption. We were an emancipated, exploited economy, beginning to start from that debilitating colonial legacy. And at 11%, even at 11%, we were able to produce a growth rate on trend basis of 4%. This was so because the I-core was rather low at 3.5, and that was so because the share of agriculture was high in this period of colonial legacy. We think that that period extended from 1951-52 to 1962-63. And in that period, given that high share of agriculture and low relative I-core, we were able to produce a trend growth rate on average of 4%. But this is although it is an upward march since then, but this is like climbing a mountain where we go for some time, then we go down on a slope, and then we go up again sometimes with a greater slope. So the next phase that happened is what we call socialist pattern phase. The chairman alluded to that. This is the phase from 1963-64 to 1972-73, the average trend growth rate fell from that 4% level to 3.6%. In fact, there is a sub period within this from 1965-66 to 72-73, and the average growth rate had fallen below 3%. And that is the one that has often been referred to as the Hindu growth rate. But there is nothing that would justify that nomenclature, because there is no such prescription of a growth rate or a saving rate that would justify that name. I will come back to the subject of Hindu growth rate when we come to the future. But this is the outcome of a colonial legacy where we inherited a subsistence economy with a very low saving rate. And although in the socialist pattern phase, saving rate increased from 7 to 14%, growth rate fell. And because it fell, because the ICAR had increased, we had opted for greater and greater capital intensive technologies. And that is why the ICAR increased. And even with higher saving rate, the growth rate fell. That's the outcome of socialist pattern option that we exercised, and not by any means anything that was prescribed in the Hindu literature or Sanatan literature. From there, we move to the third phase, which I am calling as mixed economy phase, that runs from 1973-74 to 1983-84. Saving rate continues to increase from 11 now to 14, now to 16.1 in this phase of mixed economy. And the trend growth rate improved again to 4%. The investment rate had improved to 18.6%, but the main reason why this happened is that ICAR fell to 4.9%. Now here what is happening is that the share of public investment started to fall from a peak of something like 78 to 80%. And at the end of this phase, in 83-84, the share of public investment and private investment almost became equal. And because a much higher capital intensive public sector choice had led to higher ICAR, growth rate had fell, but now it improved. And in the mixed economy phase in 83-84, there is a point of intersection where the share of private investment and public investment in total investment is almost equal. Here we have a restoration of growth back to 4%. But this period from 51-52 to 83-84, we have still languished at 4%. Now the next phase, which we are calling as first reform phase, covers the period from 84-85 to 97-98. This includes this critical year of 91, where we had these major economic reforms. This is what we refer to as first reform phase. Saving rate has continued to increase now to 18%. Investment rate has continued to increase now at 21%. ICAR has fallen to 3.9. This is able to give us a trend growth rate of 5.5% during this period. So this is a substantial improvement from what we started. And then comes the what we call the accelerating growth phase. This is the upward slope, upward ascent on our climb on the mountainous path. This period is from 98-99 to 2011-12. It contains that period to 2008-9, the global economic and financial crisis. But if you look at the trend growth rate, actually we were able to minimize that adverse impact of that crisis. And we are able to show a trend growth rate of 6.5% over the period as a whole. The ICAR is 4.8 and the investment rate is 31.3. So you see saving rate trace back 11, 14, 16, 18, 29%. And we are able to now get a trend growth rate on average of 6.5%. After that comes the global crisis phase. And that is from 2012-13 to 24-25, we are still living with some of the adverse impact of the 2008-9 crisis, but there were several crises, global crises that occurred. The chairman had actually listed some of those. It included the COVID year, and taken all of that together, the trend growth rate fell on average to 6.1%, and up to 24-25, although in recent post-COVID years, we have recovered to about 6.5%. The investment rate is 35.9. The saving rate was 34.3% in this period. But ICAR became higher again, and that's why we could not improve our growth rate beyond this. Now, after that, we have to talk about the future growth rate, potential of the future growth rate of the economy. But at this point, if I would spend 1 minute on another growth story that is accompanying this story. And that is a story of how our per capita GDP growth rate improved. Now, this is very, very interesting and intriguing in the sense that whereas GDP growth grew from an average of 4% to 6%, our per capita GDP growth has tripled in the same interval as the saving rate has tripled. And the dynamics of that is somewhat different from the dynamics that affected the story of the overall growth rate. Now, that in that dynamics, while we continue with our overall growth rate trend on trend basis, we juxtapose that with respect to what is happening to population growth rate. Now, in the first three periods that we considered, up to 1983, 97, the population growth rate on average, nothing much is happening. It has remained 2.2. And the trend growth rate has improved from 4% to 5.5%. So the trend per capita growth rate, per capita GDP growth rate, which is just the difference between the two, improved from 1.7 to 3.3%. So this is a configuration where saving and investment rates are increasing. And at the same time, the population growth rate has remained almost static. But after that, there is a substantial fall in the average population growth rate. And in the next three phases, it falls from 1.7 to 1.1. And as the trend growth rate continues to increase, our per capita GDP growth rate has now increased up to, in the period 2011 to 24, to 5%. But from here, when we launch on to the future, depending on what we assume for the trend growth rate for the next 25 years, and we are assuming 7%, then against that, if we deduct the population growth rate of 0.6, the per capita GDP growth rate comes out to be 6.4%. And that is the power that is going to unleash the Indian economy into the future, because it is the per capita GDP which will usher in this entire dream of Viksit Bharat. So we will dwell on that future for a moment, though. I will spend some time on the structure of the economy which we have inherited, in the sense that in the present, where do we stand? What are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? Now, in this period, as I indicated earlier, the share of the private sector investment continues to improve, and it is now almost the reverse of what we had started with. So from 78%, it changed to 50-50, and now it is back in favor of the private share of private investment, nearly reversing the earlier shares. The second feature is that the structure of the economy has also changed. The structure of the economy, which was 58% in real terms, a share of agriculture, is now in real only about 15%. The share of industry and services have improved, and in fact, the share of services has improved to just a little less than 60%, and share of industry is almost close to 30% or so. In that, we are including construction also, and electricity, gas, and water supply also. So the structure of output has changed, as also the structure of demand has changed, and the structure of demand is such that as far as the share of consumption demand is concerned, if we consider private and government demand, it is close to just a little less than 60%. And the share of investment or saving and investment is higher than 30% in real terms. So we have an economy which has undergone major structural changes, which will augur well for our future. And the benefits that we have is that the service sector uses a lower ICOR. Manufacturing, we have a choice. We can have labor intensive or capital intensive technologies that we have. And then we have a share of investment, which is in which both government investment and private investments are contributing. And we have a inbuilt dynamics of per capita GDP growth rate, which is close to 6%, which will enable the doubling of the incomes to in about 10 years. And that is where we will have the per capita GDP in future, which will be in line with the definition of Viksit Bharat as we go along. So with that launching pad of the present, let us now spend a few minutes on the future. This is where I come back to the idea of Hindu growth rate. Now, the Hindu scriptures, Sanatana scriptures, do not prescribe any growth rate. They prescribe a saving rate. And thus, the prescribed saving rate is 1/3 of output. I have located, although I will not go into great detail, both in the ancient Puranic literature as well as in the Kautilya's Arthashastra, that the pursuit of the 4 Purushas requires that we allocate equal shares or equal priorities to Dharma, earth, and Kam. It is the earth that is generated out of investment and saving. And they say that this pursuit should be balanced. That is to say 1/3 each. So from out of our output, 1/3 is to be allocated for the augmentation of output or income. And that 1/3 is where precisely we stand at 33% of saving rate, which is converted in modern times with a certain supplementation by current account deficit to about 35%. To that, if we apply an ICOR of 5, we get a 7% growth rate. So we have this growth rate, which is coming from our Hindu prescriptions. Luckily, of course, they go further into how much should be the optimal tax rate and how that tax rate should be spent, or tax revenue should be spent. They have a concept of publicly provided services, and they have a concept of privately provided social services through organization contributions equivalent to what we now call as corporate social responsibility, and through the mandal or temple infrastructure. So there is a very detailed description of how one should organize one's economy. It's not, so therefore it was a great injustice, I think, that because without any backing, without any justification, Sanatana literature was not really understood. And we continue to consider as if something like 3% is Hindu growth rate. Actually, if you look at what is prescribed in terms of the saving rate, it is going to be 7%. Now, when we come to the future, let me begin by a quotation from Shakespeare. In Macbeth, he observes, if you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak then unto me. Nobody really can look into the seeds of time and tell which grain will grow, it will not. But many economists ventured into forecasting this. Actually, there was a spurt of studies during the period 21-25 about forecasting the size of the future Indian economy. OECD, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Fickey McKinsey, EY itself. In fact, our team itself undertook a detailed modeling exercise for forecasting India's future size. And we came up with an estimate of 26 trillion in market exchange rate terms by 2047-48 and 46 trillion in terms of purchasing power parity terms. Krishnamurthy Subramaniam takes an average real GDP growth of 8% up to this period. He assumes an inflation rate of 5% and depreciation rate of 1%. And he argues that per capita GDP would be undergoing three times the doubling procedure. So Viksit Bharat will have a per capita GDP which would be more than what is now currently being indicated as a threshold of developed economy at 13,845 in market exchange terms. So but actually in India, whenever we have a purchasing power parity that will enable us that much of purchasing power, we will actually cross this rather quickly. At current, the purchasing power parity equivalent in per capita GDP is 11,495. So one doubling process will take us into Viksit Bharat status. But Viksit Bharat needs to be unraveled further in the sense that it is not just the per capita income that should be considered, but various critical issues are there which we have abstracted from as to what is the profile of income inequality, what is the balance between urban and rural GDP, what is the position of poverty alleviation, what is the quality of life, how should we deal with critical social expenditures like health and education, how should we undertake reforms such that unemployment could be attended to given the rising share of working age population, given the challenge and opportunities that technical progress puts forward to us. So one advantage with which I would like to end this presentation is to say that this is our window in terms of the demographic dividend that we are experiencing. And it is up to by 2030, we are slated to become the country that will have the highest share in working age population, lowest dependency ratio. By 2056, we will have an old age dependency. Up to that point, the young age dependency would be remaining lower than old age dependency. And after that, for the remaining part of this century, actually, we will have the largest working age people contributing to the global labor force. With that kind of advantage and this kind of dynamics of per capita GDP growth, I think in spite of any immediate current challenges, we are very well placed in our future. And all of that would be very consistent with what is really prescribed in our Sanatan literature. So let me thank you at this point. I think Professor Mahendev's speaker is not on.
Muted. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Srivastava. Basically, he has used this 7 phases: colonial legacy phase, socialistic pattern, mixed economy, first reform, and accelerating. All this in terms of savings and also investment thing, and savings gradually improved, and also ICOR, incremental capital output ratio changes, and the per capita GDP is much more faster. They tripled over time, and also the structure of the economy has changed the output as the supply side as well as the demand side over time from agriculture to particular services, and also the demand side also some changes. And on future, about the growth rate, the 7% is needed. It is, inconsistent with the ancient texts of savings and all 1/3, and which gives 7% growth. And so he calls it the future growth as the Hindu rate of growth. And there are so many projections also. And in the end, it says we have a demographic dividend thing. So thank you very much. And now invite Dr. Satish Verma to speak.
Thank you, Prof. I'm really grateful to Professor Charan Singh ji for giving me an opportunity to speak on such an important topic, and particularly on this day, the 15th of August. Almost 70 years ago, we got independence, and now we are looking backward as well as forward as to how we are going to progress and what are going to be our future prospects. At the same time, I am grateful to him for making me a part of a panel which is so distinguished with the Professor Mahendra Devji in the chair, who is presently the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to Prime Minister, and Professor D.K. Srivastava ji, as well as Dr. Raychaudhuri ji. I have listened to Dr. D.K. Srivastava ji, really an excellent presentation. Well, I would be concentrating on the growth story in 3 parts. The first part, of course, will be the first 3 decades up till 1970, end of the 70s, then beginning 80 to 2014 and thereafter. And then discussing what are the future prospects that India is having right now. So particularly in the initial decades since independence in 1947, India traversed a bumpy road with its growth trajectory resembling like a roller coaster. The initial 3 decades presented a rather dismal growth picture, with the average decadal GDP growth rate at 3.9% in the 50s, 4.1% in the 60s, and a steep fall to 2.9% in the 70s. The point has been made very well by Professor D.K. Srivastava. Now, this period was marked by strict controls on technology and foreign investment, and a rigid licensing system that throttled growth in the country. This was indeed a very disturbing and a turbulent period. A severe drought in 1965, a sharp currency devaluation, 57% in 1966, the Indochina War, 2 wars with Pakistan, then political instability in the 70s, and the emergency in 75 that severely destabilized and adversely affected growth prospects of the country. Beginning in 1980, the economy began to improve with the global dismantling of controls, gradual dismantling of controls, implementation of fiscal reforms, abandonment of inward-looking trade strategies, greater integration with the global economy, and the adoption of the liberalization policy in 1991. So the country or the economy started opening up, though gradually, beginning 1980, but full-fledged liberalization in 1991. The average decadal GDP growth in each subsequent period was high. So starting from 5.7%. Sir, am I audible? Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Hello. The average decadal GDP growth in each subsequent period was higher, 5.7% in the 80s, 5.8% in 90s, 6.3% in 2000s, and 7.01% during 2009 to 14. The period from 1980 to 2014 marked a transition from a socialist to a market-oriented economy and witnessed the emergence of the private sector as a key driver of economic growth. However, the period also faced significant challenges, including a buildup of bad debts, much of it originating between 2006 and 2008, high fiscal deficits, persistent double-digit inflation, and a sharp depreciation of the Indian rupee against the US dollar. Beginning 2014, several growth-oriented initiatives like Make in India, Startup India, skill development programs, direct benefit transfers, Jan Dhan Yojana, the production-linked incentive scheme, and Digital India were launched. These were complemented by significant structural reforms, particularly in the banking and fiscal domains. Regulatory overhauls, such as the goods and services tax and corporate and income tax reforms, enhanced MSME support, improvements in the ease of doing business, and better performance on global competitiveness indices. They were the prominent features of the third period starting 2014 till now. During this period, India emerged as the fastest growing economy among the G20 nations. As a matter of fact, amongst all the nations, if we go through the latest estimates by the OECD as well as the World Bank, domestic growth was largely propelled by robust private final consumption expenditure and a marked increase in capital expenditure. The government shifted its growth strategy in boosting public sector capital expenditure, which rose from rupees 5.6 lakh crore in financial year 2015 to 18.6 lakh crore in financial year 2024. Grants to states for asset creation also rose by about 2.8 times, reflecting government's emphasis on capital formation at all levels of governance. Earlier also this point was raised that emphasis is being placed on the growth at almost each regional level, starting with the states, cities, villages, and the Nagarpalika, because it is believed that India can be Viksit if all these levels of government, they are Viksit. Infrastructure investment also surged. Overall, capital spending as percent of central government's total expenditure rose from 12% in financial year 18 to 22% in financial year 24. That is the budget. The last figure is the budget estimates. Now, as far as the growth parameters are concerned, they indicate very strong fundamentals, with investment rate having picked up from 27.3% in 21-22 to 29.8% in 23-24. Non-food bank credit rose from 2.7% in 2020-21 to 13.1% in 2023-24. Bank credit to MSMEs also grew at the compound annual growth rate of 14.2% during 2018-19 to 2023-24. In the banking sector, gross NPAs showed a declining trend, and from about 11.2% in 2017-18, it fell to 2.6%. Now, this is really a very, very important development, because during the mid first decade of the new millennium, the government announced a doubling of credit somewhere around 2004-5 to 2007-8 or to 2006-7. Because of that, the banks accumulated bad debts, and that was called probably the NPAs. Now the NPAs are under control, They fell from 11.2% in 17-18 to 5.8% in 21-22, 3.2% in September 2023, and 2.6% in 2023. So taking the year as a whole, it is now 2.6%. Agricultural output has also shown a good progress from 3.4% during 2005-14. Now it is 3.7% 2015 to 23, and now 23-24 it is going to be, the estimate is 3.8%. Agriculture exports have also risen, industrial growth has also picked up, unemployment rate fallen to 3.2%, and corporate profits to GDP ratio, that is also higher. Now in 2024-25, 4.7%, marking a 17-year high. So the corporate profits being high means a good prospects as far as the corporate sector is concerned. Now I will concentrate in this scenario. I will concentrate now on the future prospects. During July-September, that is the second quarter of financial year 25, the GDP registered a modest growth of 5.6%, lowest in the past 6 quarters, which has been highlighted as a decelerating trend in India's growth. The growth of index of industrial production also slowed down to 2.8% from 4.6% in the same period last year. Moreover, the weakening was observed as broad-based, particularly visible in urban consumption, accompanied with elevated food prices, high borrowing costs, stagnant real wage growth. These factors eroded purchasing power, raising concerns about the sustainability of consumption-led growth. But the economy soon rebounded and grew by about 6.4% in the third quarter. In the second quarter, it went down, but in the third quarter, it regained its growth trajectory, and the rate of growth registered for the third quarter of 2024-25 was 6.4%, 7.4% in the fourth quarter, again 7.4% in the first quarter of 2026. That means the economy internally is strong, though there can be some quarters where the growth rate might slightly fall down. The pickup in growth rate mainly was driven by fixed investment, which increased sharply to 9.4% from a low of 5.2% in the preceding quarter, owing to a sustained momentum in construction activity. While highlighting in its June, now I am discussing the issue regarding the second quarter 2024-25 slower rate of growth of around 5.6%. And where some economists, they started discussing that probably we are in the decelerating phase. While highlighting in its June 2025 bulletin that the global economy reeling from the twin shocks of trade policy uncertainties and a spike in geopolitical tensions, the Reserve Bank of India observed that the Indian economy has remained resilient across the industrial and services sectors, as evidenced by various high frequency indicators, a point already brought out Professor Srivastava. Agriculture showed a broad-based increase in production across most major crops during 2024-25. The expected rate of growth is going to be 3.8%. Domestic price situation remained benign, with headline inflation staying below the target for the fourth consecutive month in May 2025. International agencies like OECD in its World Economic Outlook and the World Bank in its Global Economic Prospects in their June 2025 release observed that India, with a projected growth rate of about 6.5%, will outpace the global economy and China and all other major country growth in both 2025 and 26. So the immediate prospects as far as the Indian economy is concerned in regard to its growth, they are really excellent, and we are on a trajectory on the growth path quite smoothly. It has been sometimes argued that India can still achieve its objective of Viksit Bharat if it develops and exploits her comparative advantage. Now, the issue basically is that India has many strengths, and how to develop and exploit fully the comparative advantage. I have noted 4 points here. The first point is broadening and deepening the economic and institutional reforms. The reforms will have to be broad-based, and we will have to take reforms reforms to much lower level, to a much higher level. In particular, what is being argued is that all the people in the economy, whether it be the health, whether it be education, whether it be skill, they should be given equal opportunity. Now, it is believed that if equal opportunity is provided, then probably the productivity of the labor will go up. And as an example, the case of gender parity is presented. Now, in its case, it has been pointed out that if gender parity in employment and wages is ensured, then the GDP of the economy can grow by 1.4% or 5% higher. IMF has also given an estimate for India that if the gender parity is ensured in wages and employment, then its GDP can be 27%. So basically, it's not a case of only the gender parity. It is in case of the parity in all aspects, whether it is education, health, skill, or in all other aspects, if equality is ensured, and for which deep economic and institutional reforms are needed. Second is the transforming the quality of the human resources. So we need to transform the quality of human resources, for which the education policy has already been announced, and we need to go through it. And moreover, one point which I have read in the literature is that somewhere around 12 crore people in the age of 18 to 35, they are neither in education nor in employment. Now, this is a serious aspect, in the sense that if they are neither in education nor in employment, and such a large population of around 12 crores, means that we will have to upgrade our education system. We will have to upgrade our skills. We need to bring all these people into the main economy, such that they can also contribute their might into the growth of the nation. Next is learning from the experiences of high income and advanced countries. China is usually given the example. That's the usual example. China entered WTO in 2001. But by 2007, the proportion of China's exports in the global exports crossed even that of America. It became the manufacturing hub. I have seen certain figures and found that in certain cases, almost 65 to 66% of the world exports are from China. 65 to 66%. And in case of cycle industry and the auto parts, it is somewhere around 35%. So we need to learn from them that how could they convert, or how could they achieve such a growth, particularly the export of the manufacturing products, where we are at a lower we are at a low place. We are placed at lowly. I will come to this point later also. Now, taking new advantages in the global polity and economy, and that part is right before us as far as these tariffs currently we are talking about. Now, given this kind of the scenario, what are the opportunities we have? We have already said that as far as the first opportunity is that we have is the equality in regard to the distribution of the government services, various kinds of government services, the equal opportunity to all in all the domains, And as far as the women are concerned, this is our big force. Only 37% of women comprise are part of the labor force, that is the labor force participation rate, which is only the 37% as far as the women is concerned. If we could raise it to 70%, probably we will be in a position to have 1.4% higher GDP in the economy. Now, we have to have a competitive market economy. There is a demographic change also. It has been found that India, the point which has already been raised, that India is already having a high proportion of working age population in the global population. China's share is declining now. China's share will go down to almost 12.7% from 20.3% right now, a fall about 7.8% in 2050. While that of India, now we are at 18.3%, our share will go marginally low by 0.3 percentage points. So far from 2020 to 50, we have 30 years, and now we are in the 25. So for another 50 years, we have got a good time, and we must exploit it. But there are challenges also. The first challenge is boosting and sustaining private consumption, which requires wage growth. We need to talk about the wage growth. As a matter of fact, some statistics say that we have experienced a wage growth in case of the casual labor only, while in case of the wages and the salaried class, it actually declined by minus 0.4% annually over 2018 to 2023. As regards the self-employment sector is concerned, wage growth is only 0.6%. Taking
Sorry, Dr. Satish Verma, can you please complete?
Sir, 3 points left only. 2 points left only.
Because time is already 5:10.
Yeah, the only 2 points left. So, boosting and sustaining private consumption through wage growth, employment initiatives. Today, the Vice Prime Minister has announced one employment initiative and targeted welfare programs. Then ensuring optimistic demand outlook. There is also some surveys which indicate that the demand outlook needs to be encouraged further. With the profits looking up as far as the corporate sector is concerned, if we are in a position to adopt such policies that could improve the demand prospects in the economy, the corporate sector will be coming up with larger investments. Then there are the government must continue with its emphasis on government expenditure. And the last point, there are 2 points more. One is that as far as the manufacturing sector is concerned in India, its share in GDP is very low, just 12.5%. China's 25%, Germany 17.8%, and UK 17.33%. Now, this low scale of production in the manufacturing sector, this is one of the challenges we are facing. And another is the dominance of informality in this sector, particularly the MSMEs. Then we are having low labor productivity. Agriculture, we can say, this 46% labor force engaged, contributing just 18%. So the productivity compared to the national average is just 20%. So we need to improve it. And wherever possible, we have to draw the surplus labor from agriculture and employ somehow in the industrial sector, maybe in the rural areas. So for this purpose, proper skill programs are to be developed, proper education programs. Having said this, I end up by saying that even though we have certain challenges, but the challenges are always pave a path for further development in the economy. I am very hopeful that India will be able to achieve the aim, the objective of Viksit Bharat, because if I remember that in 2014, India's GDP was US dollar 2.04 trillion and became 3.7 trillion in 2023, almost doubled. So if it almost doubled within a period of decade, and we achieve our target of US dollar 7 trillion in 2030, in another 20 years, doubling, further doubling, that will take place first in 2040, then in 2050. This is possible because technology, with technological progress, is expected to take place at a much larger speed in days to come. With the government being very active about improving the technology in the country as well as improving the human resources in the country. With these words, I am grateful and thankful to Professor Charan Singh for giving me this opportunity to talk from this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Satish Verma. Yeah, he has given basically 3 pages. One is the first 3 decades, and then 1984 to 2014, and then 2014 onwards, and then future. In the 2014, of course, the NPAs and other things were there. But now the NPS has declined, and corporates also, the twin balance sheet problem.
Yeah,
is not there now.
Yeah, it's not there.
The future, he talked about, the last year growth initially was not there, but now we have recovered. And then he has given some suggestions like institutional reforms, gender parity, the human resources, and also manufacturing sector, how do we do, and equality of opportunity and all. So thank you very much, Professor Satish Verma. And now I move to the last speaker, Professor Raychaudhuri.
Yes, I must thank first the EGROW Foundation, Charan Singh, for very kindly inviting me here. And I really enjoyed the presence of so many luminaries here. In fact, Dr. Mahendra, though, I know him earlier also, and all the, guest speakers here. The advantage of speaking last is that many points have been spoken. And so it cuts short my speech in a way that I can round up things in my own way, because certain data and certain facts have already been told. Now, let me divide the whole thing, the past, the present, and the future in this way. The past has been very clearly, expanded and told by Prof. Srivastava and the other speakers here, in fact, in the introduction as well. Now, I point out the most important thing which I felt constrained the growth scenario in the past, especially in the 70s, 80s, and the debate which arose at that point. The first thing was one such line of thought was very clearly pointed out by Professor Jagdish Bhagwati with Padma Desai, and then Ann Kruger and others, which is called directly unproductive activities, DUP. The main thing is the high transaction cost. The whole licensing system, the dominance of public sector gave rise to transaction cost in the sense that things were held up. There was bureaucratic delay. There was, corruption in the system. That really, if you calculate the growth rate, the potential growth rate was much higher, cut short by the DUP activities. And this whole literature of DUP activities grew out of our Indian history, so to say. So we contributed there, but as well as that gave an opportunity for the economic science to progress, how to get rid of DUP activities in an economy. Now, I would try to say that there are 2 sides of the economic arguments. One is a long-term view, that's the growth. The other is the short-term management of demand and supply. I want to pursue my line of thought in 2 directions. I don't want to mix up the growth scenario with the short-term adjustment and allocation process. And let me first point out the growth part. you know, the so-called growth theories, which we say, all of you know, and I'm just reiterating once more. The growth, the equations and everything comes out of an equilibrium scenario where demand and supply really match. Otherwise, these growth equations cannot be formulated. But the fact is, they do not match all the time. There are problems underneath the long-term growth, the short-term adjustment problems. So the first thing is the growth. If I assume that there is no problems, there's a demand and supply of matching, the main problem is savings and incremental capital output ratio, then we must note one thing which has occurred. No doubt the public sector savings has gone down, the private sector savings has gone up. In recent last 10 years, we find a huge rise in the, which I think was not there. The household sector savings is there, but if you look at the last few years, the corporate sector is saving sometimes 11%, 12%, 13% of the private savings. Very important. What happens to these corporate savings? Where are they going? Are they going to the capital formation? Are they held up and not coming back in somewhere or other in the investment process? This has to be thought about, because this compositional change is a very important change which has taken place in the last 10 years or so. The other aspect is, when there is a shortage of total gross capital formation and domestic savings rate, we have to have the foreign investment, which bridges the whole thing. And if we look at the foreign investment, although the distinction between foreign portfolio investment and the foreign direct investment is blurred, now it's called foreign investment in a way. The fact is, whenever we talk about the foreign investment, the portfolio investment plays a very important role. And in my own research, I have seen that the domestic institutional investors, if I call it DII, if I compare with the foreign institutional investors who lead the foreign investment in the equity and portfolio markets, who takes the lead role? DII is a big sector. We have very important institutional. And the FIIs follow, or we are the followers when the FIIs do something? Clearly, in my own research in terms of all the econometrics, I'm not going into this econometrics part. Clearly, we found, I mean, we did it in the something like 2000, 2015, 16. I haven't gone into the recent data. It was the FII which were the leaders and DII the followers. When they take a decision, we follow it. It's not that we take a decision, they follow. Has it changed or not? I don't know. I want to raise this, that this needs to be somewhat moderated to a certain extent. Otherwise, the economy in that sense, whenever there is a gap between the savings and gross capital formation, some uncertainty, some fluctuations are bound to happen. And there the DII, huge sector, lots of funds with them, must take a lead role. Now, let me just move away from the growth scenario and talked about the historical growth, the problems there, and then the recent growth, the compositional aspect, etc. Let me now move on to something like the so-called short-term adjustment scenario. We often hear now that right now we have a demand deficiency. Previously, during the earlier part of COVID, somewhat very close to COVID period, somewhat earlier, because the growth rate started falling from 2014-15 onwards. It's not that all 2011, 12, 12, 13, 14, quite high growth rate. The growth rate started falling during that period. In some of the writings, it was supply side constraint. During just post-COVID, it was still the supply side. Now we do not hear the word supply side constraint, but it's a demand side constraint. What is the econometric work which has gone behind it? I am not sure. The State Bank of India in its research cell, as you mentioned, Shomuk and the Ghosh, they are doing some work. RBI has done some work. And I take very simple thing which, to my mind, points out to this demand side story. If I go to the Obicus survey, which is the capacity utilization survey published by Reserve Bank of India, they give very clear indicators of capacity utilization, how it is going. Obviously, the capacity utilization was much higher during the 2011 to, if you call it, up to 15 or something. the peak period, as you know, Q4 is really the peak period. It has the so-called the festive season effect and everything. It touched 81, 82%. Now, in the average has gone down to 72, 73% capacity utilization as overall. How do I know it's not a supply side constant but a demand side constant? Because the policies will be different. It has to be very clear. To basically it's a demand side. The reason people think it's demand side, I believe, they publish a data of stock of your inventory of final goods to total sales. That means the goods which you cannot sell. That percentage, which was, if you look at the early 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, it was hovering around 16%, 17%. It has gone up to now 25, 26%. That gives an indication that the farms would not sell their goods. It's not that the supply side constraint is constraining the facts. It's really that goods cannot be sold. Now we can have a sector-wise analysis where the goods cannot be sold. It's needed. I mean, it's one thing to say that the inventory of unsold goods have gone up, but let's break it up, disaggregate into sectors and see what is happening. It can be electronic sector, it can be leather, it can be textiles, it can be chemical products, it can be anything. So there I would, and go to my third point now. If we believe it's a demand side problem, consumer expenditure is an issue, certainly. I mean, we may need a higher consumer expenditure, but then that will tail upon the savings rate. So there is a fine balance which has to be struck so that the growth and the short-term demand problem can be managed. Now, if I go into that what can be done there? We hear so much about, it's a common thing people talk about. I don't know whether the common person knows it, but they, most of the time, they've heard the word multiplier. And I've seen that, people even who do not know economics talk about multiplier because this thing is told in many cases. The multiplier, as we know, is a simple multiplier, but the government has to play a role. And in fact, today, the government is playing a role through their public sector investment. That's one of the biggest thing of demand right now, because the private sector investment is static. It's not growing that much. The multiplier effect of an investment, if I again hark back to Domer's two-way things, a multiplier increases supply side capacity as well as increases purchasing power of people. So it's a two-pronged thing which is there. But the multiplier becomes less if the inequality parameters in the economy grows. In the standard multiplier, its inequality is hidden. It's not there. But if you break it up among groups of income earners and see that, as we know, that the propensity to consume is much higher for the people who are in the lower bottom. And if there is inequality, which has to be measured very correctly, because so much controversy about inequality. Consumption expenditure inequality is something, income inequality expenditure is something else. Obviously, there are reasons to believe they will be different. But the point is, the moment you break it up, the multiplier into groups, we know that once you break it up in the group, the standard multiplier value is much higher than when you break it up. Why? Because when you break it up into groups, the inequality comes in. And there the multiplier effect comes much lower. When the potential is much higher, the actual is lower. So are we talking in terms of the potential, or are we talking about the actual? If we talk about the potential, we are not achieving it. But if we talk in terms of the potential, but we work with the actual, then there is always a gap. The demand side problem remains because part of the narrative which we are making is not correct. Because we are working with the actual, although we are thinking in terms of the potential. And so many things come up here. I'm not going too much into that for lack of time. The question of labor market reform. If I do a labor market reform, what happens to the wages? We have to ensure through the economic growth that the wages are not repressed. If the wages are repressed, you will have this problem of the gap between the potential and actual multiplier widening. So we must be careful. The other thing is that we can publish many types of unemployment data, but there are so much informal sector. As you know, if you ask anybody in the informal sector, in terms of the National Statistical Service or PLFS, people are not treated as unemployed because they will say, I'm working something. And now in terms of ILO definition, they will be unemployed. But in terms of the definition we use in National Statistical Office, they will be called employed. But it will not be the kind of employment which we desire. So one thing is to say that we can publish unemployment figures, but in a Vikshit Bharat, I think unemployment, if I reduce it, it means the job must have not only an efficient job, a job which allows the potential productivity to be maximized, and the security of the worker after retirement and etc. must be ensured. That's the goal, and that has to be really gone in. The last thing which I want to mention is the uncertainty which has engulfed us, the geopolitical uncertainty, the tariff uncertainty. Now, one thing which is very important in the history of economic growth, if we look at it, the engine of growth in the world was East Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries, the so-called ASEAN +3. They were the engine of growth. And how did they grow? One major thing is, after all, they were not the big economies like India. China was a big economy, and China has a transformation which I will just touch upon. What happened to them is they were the pioneers of the global value chain, the supply chain, so to say. And what happened in the supply chain? They increased the intra-ASEAN trade to a level of something like 45%. And as a result, the market expanded. And once the market expanded, you have economies of scale, you have all the benefits which an expanded market has. We have a huge domestic market, so we do not face a problem that we cannot reap the benefit of economies of scale. But the problem is when there is a geopolitical disturbance and when the economy has opened up. Obviously, we have opened up. The export plus import is something like 30% or more now, 35%. So we are opened up. And in that case, GVC is something like a safety net for us, because that creates that we are not directly affected by a tariff on us, but maybe we, being in a global value chain, we absorb the shock to a certain extent. The problem is we are a latecomer in this global value chain. And when the world was moving away from China and the China plus strategy, then we are facing competition from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and all these countries. They are fighting to grab a piece of it. Tough thing when you come in a value chain system late. There's advantage and disadvantage, and we have to balance it out and get the best out of it. What we can do. Make in India, the productivity link incentive schemes all really are to reap the harvest of global value chain. If we make in India, we do not necessarily create it for Indian domestic market. It can be for the value chain as well. And they are the MSME, the strategy that whether they will run on their own or they will run and as a linked to large industries, that question comes up. And to my mind, I have no doubt if what happened in Thailand, Malaysia, and other countries, the MSME, Vietnam also to a certain extent, MSME got linked to the large industries, and the large industries did not stay large. They subcontracted out, outsourced the thing. The world becomes somewhat small in terms of production scenario, and that's something which we should really look into. And so, there's a criticism that productivity linked incentive scheme didn't work. Make in India, but I do not believe throwing the baby with the bathwater is the solution. The solution is what's ailing the thing, and we should correct it. Don't throw out and leave the scheme that cannot be part of Vikshit Bharat. Certainly, it can be a part of Vikshit Bharat. It's a very important part of Vikshit Bharat. And with that, just last thing, China. We talked so much about China and value chain, and China controls so much of the raw materials and intermediate goods, and that when China sneezes, the world catches cold. But what's happened in China's story? China was a supplier to a large extent when they started with the non-resident Chinese. They opened up and they supplied parts to automobile and then electronics and etc. But now they have turned the role the other way. They are not the supplier; they are producer now. They are getting their supply chain intermediate goods from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Southeast Asia. If you look at the inter-ASEAN trade, China has a reversed role now. They are not the supplier, they are the buyer of the intermediate goods. So one should be careful about the role China has played. First, supply chain, supplier, and then supply chain, buyer, purchaser. I think we don't have much time. So with this, I just end, and I hope I have some food for thought for general audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Raychaudhuri. Yeah, you mentioned about the directly unproductive activities. Professor Jagdish Bhagwati and Padma Desai. Yeah, we used to read in the our classes also. The growth and the demand supply things, and so corporate savings have have improved better, and then between FII and portfolio, FII and DII. I don't know now. DII may be the leader. One has to see the analysis.
Correct.
And the demand deficiency, according to you, is more important reason for thing, and mentioned by capacity utilization. Inventories, it's a good thing that inventories share reflects the demand deficiency. And on labor market reforms, yeah, you rightly mentioned the wages part, and then the informality, and also they're important for their wages and other things for demand creation, because the marginal propensity to save is, to consume is higher. MPC is higher for them. And then lastly, the geopolitical uncertainties, the GVCs and all, very good suggestions. Now, Dr. Charan Singh, how much time for Q&A? 10 minutes?
Yeah, Professor. 10 minutes should be okay. I have a flight to catch.
Oh, okay.
So I think 10 minutes is perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's open now. Any questions?
Can I butt in here?
Yeah.
I am MP Besbarwa. I just, it was a lively and very rich discussion. But one thing I think which we should take into account in our discussion is that this disruption by Trump, maybe the world will be able to overcome. But the fourth industrial revolution, robotization of the industries, and coming of AI, that's going to probably further reduce the job opportunities, although it will open up new opportunities sometimes. But this is a big challenge, which can be a major problem in, distributing the benefits of growth. If that is something which has not been taken into account. So I request the speakers to kindly take note of it. Just another point is that we not only need to look into the per capita income, but also one speaker has mentioned, we need to, I think, look into the per capita income of probably the bottom 30% of population, which will be a real indicator of whether development benefits are percolating down or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll
Professor Mahendra, can I ask one quick question?
Please.
Just an observation to Professor Srivastava. I know we are having a detailed discussion on October 10, and I'm sure we are going to get the richness of the book, which I've read and I've felt very good. But one quick observation, Professor Srivastava and others too, when we are entering the Viksit Club of the world, as it is defined these days in terms of per capita income, Of course, the Prime Minister in his morning speech said that there is more than just quantified parameters, there's much more. And one thought that I have is we'll just be at the entry level of the club. Whereas the club has people with per capita incomes of Luxembourg, 1 lakh, USA, 85,000, Norway, another big number. So I think though we are entering the club in 22 years, and that threshold level probably will move from 14,000, 13,000 something, 14,000 to probably 20,000 in 22 years. And if we have to crack that 20,000 per capita income threshold at that point, we may have to recalculate our growth rates. So just an observation, but I'm keenly looking forward to October 10 to listen in detail. So sorry for that.
Yeah, so we'll collect some questions and then.
Am I
There are
audible,
huge,
Dr. Mahendra?
there are huge number of questions in the chat box, by the way.
Oh, okay. So,
Am I audible, Professor Mahendra?
yeah, Professor Mahendra ready?
Yeah. Let me congratulate you for your excellent remarks and the excellent panel discussion. I like to know the Viksit Bharat by 2047. Which are the leading states which will realize that goal, and which are the lagging states? What, since the time is short, I'll be extremely brief. What should be the strategy to be adopted so that the entire Bharat realizes Viksit Bharat, not just only the leading state, and leave it. Several suggestions have been made, but keeping this in mind, what should be the strategy? Thank you, sir. Once again, hearty congratulations to you.
Thank you. So in the chat box, many are there. Savings rate increase our economies where we are growing a new growth. Yeah. So, yeah, we start with Dr. Srivastava.
Well, yes, yeah. I think very important questions and observations have been raised.
Yeah.
And it will take time to really address those. But some of the immediate questions I would give a first response. But in particular, the last question about the state profile in terms of reaching the Viksit status is a very critical question. And convergence in per capita incomes across states has not happened yet. Convergence studies indicate that actually there are three kind of clubs that are getting formed. One is some of the richer, medium income to richer states that have high per capita incomes. Some of those may already have a Viksit status as per current definitions. Those would obviously be there in that by the 47, 48. The other group is the special so-called northeastern and Himalayan states, and those also have high per capita incomes, and therefore I think that that group will also attain the developed status. It is some of the large population central to North Indian states where this problem may have to be really faced, which includes Bihar, I think, and that itself covers a very large segment of population and some part of eastern Uttar Pradesh. So I think that is an ongoing challenge, but I think that is some of those are the issues that are being addressed. Many of the states are now looking at their own kind of 1 trillion size ambitions and so on. In my view, if UP can come out of the lower income strata, most of the issues can be solved, because then there would be only one state which is receiving attentions now, and we still have something like 22 years to go. So I think we should be able to take the word across. Now, the issue about whether we should cover our per capita GDP number, compare our per capita GDP number with those of some of the Scandinavian countries and so on, I don't think that is a highly appropriate or relevant question in the present context, because we have to look at two matrices. That is, what is our population size vis-a-vis their population size, and what is our GDP when we have developed we have crossed the threshold for per capita GDP. So our GDP size would be much larger, and therefore our contribution of demand in the global economy would be much larger. And there is no need for us to really reach those levels. In fact, since I talked about the Sanatan literature, let me say that there is a concept beyond poverty alleviation, which can be summarized by the phrase minimum assured prosperity. As long as we can have minimum assured prosperity above a threshold which is much higher than the poverty threshold, we should be better off in terms of welfare, as long as we again look into the balance of what we consume in terms of what is our sattvic, what is our rasic, and what is our tamasic consumption. And therefore, much greater and in-depth philosophical debate has to take place as to what is the optimum output structure and wherein welfare of the human being lies beyond the question of per capita GDPs and so on.
Yeah, Professor Satish Verma and Professor Raychaudhuri. Yeah, maybe 3 minutes each.
Yeah, just 1 minute, sir.
Yeah.
Regarding this question, as far as the state's status in Viksit Bharat in 2047, I would like to mention here an article by Sanjeev Sanyalji. He has written it along with his colleague. This article compares the growth of the states in relation to their contribution in national GDP and their per capita income relative to the national average over a period 1960 to probably 2023 to 2024. Now, interesting conclusions emerged from there. There are two conclusions which are very important. One is that there are at least two states whose status deteriorated or whose contribution deteriorated, both in terms of per capita income as well as their share in the national GDP. One is Punjab, the other is the West Bengal. These are the two states which we need to look into in detail. That why is it happening? Punjab has lost on both the indicators, losing position, and similarly West Bengal, though exact figures I do not remember, but that is the crux. Second part is that Bihar remains where it was. Well, it was at the end, it remains at the end, though UP has slightly improved. So basically, the central government knows that if India is to be a Viksit, then all the states will have to be a Viksit up in 2047. They have asked the states to prepare their Viksit Bharat plan, and the states are doing it, which is really a good part, a welcome part. So I believe that we need to look at certain states and their growth and how do they perform over a period of time. Regarding one question regarding this artificial intelligence and employment question, what the person was mentioning was Industry 4.0, wherein, like in the industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, including 4.0, they displace the labor in one way or the other, because technology, labor displacing technology was adopted. But now the world is talking about Industrial Revolution 5.0, and this concept originated somewhere around 2018 or so in Germany, with Europe participating very actively. And they mentioned that we should have a technology which should not replace labor. Rather, by skilling up the labor, we should be able to absorb them along with the artificial intelligence activity, because these technology upgradation cannot be stopped. It will go on because it is always cost effective.
Yeah.
But then the labor will have to be trained accordingly, and the skill, and probably we are on the right path as far as India is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Raychaudhuri? Yeah, you are on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, the point which Professor Srivastava raised is very important. After all, the actors all, they decide in different states.
Yeah.
Though unless the states perform, how can India perform? It's a setup where it's a federal setup. And just one point which I want to note, a finance commission has an important role to play. And they talk about revenue equalization, horizontal equality. But till now, and in fact, I did a work and presented those things in front of the Finance Commission. I think it's the 14th Finance Commission. Finance Commission doesn't take into account capital expenditure at all. It's left to ministries and left to, after all, growth depends on, inadequacy of capital. So it's all revenue expenditure and its equalization revenue. What matters to Finance Commission? Why not capital expenditure? Why not capital expenditure should be part of the devolution rule and the inadequacy of capital, which makes the states coming behind of one another? Why shouldn't that be part of the devolution rule? I didn't get an answer at that time, but I think for a dynamic view, which the Finance Commission should take instead of a static equalization, that's very important. That's my view on this. Thank you.
Yes. To conclude, some of the questions relate to distribution and also, inequality and all. So the Viksit Bharat doesn't mean only growth. Of course, we concentrated mostly on growth. It is also inclusive growth. Inclusive growth basically, according to me, is the quality employment. And also health and education, providing to equal opportunities for these people, and of course the direct benefit transfers and social protection. Those are other things for policy point of view. So it doesn't mean we are talking only of growth. Viksit Bharat means it is growth, inclusive growth, and also sustainability. Somebody asked climate change and other things. So these three are we have to achieve. It's not just per capita income kind of thing. So of course, the manufacturing growth is the government is also focusing more on that, which because the employment and output share has been constant for a long time. But as mentioned by Professor Raychaudhuri, the demand deficiency is also important. For that, we need quality employment, wages and other things. And also there is another one, once we reach middle income, there is a middle income trap. So one has to avoid that middle income trap, because once we have growth next few years, 7% or beyond, but after that it becomes difficult. I think Professor Srivastava has given in the book also, after some time we may have 4% or 5% growth kind of thing. So we have to be careful about that. On states, Sanjeev Srivastava, my colleague at EACPM, it's on the website, their paper on because the states are the important, not only for growth, but also for other things, health, education, other things, they're important. In fact, my analysis showed that per capita income, there is no convergence, it is diverging. Whereas there is a convergence in human development. By design, they are converged. Bihar will catch up on infant mortality and other things with Kerala. So there is a thing, but per capita income we have to be more state specific. With this, I thank all the panelists and very excellent presentations and good questions, and also Dr. Charan Singh for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll,
Professor Mahendra Dev, thank you very much for chairing this session and conducting it and trying to close on such a vast topic. As Professor Srivastava mentioned at the outset, having written a book, worked all his life on that, how to now speak in 15 minutes and cover the whole thing. It's a challenge.
yeah.
And 3 professors, including the chair, how do you contain them in 90 minutes? Each one of them has so much to share. So I totally thank you for
Yeah.
conducting it so well. And I want to thank each of the panelists. I also want to mention once again that we are discussing this book on 10th of October. I would invite all of you. We had nearly 116 people on the today attending it. I would like all of you to come and please participate in it, in that discussion. Government of India in the budget gave a definition of Viksit Bharat. And it is on the greeting card of the think tank EGROW today's. No poverty, quality school education, quality healthcare, meaningful employment for all,
Yeah.
70% women in economic activities, and then there is the India to serve as food basket of the world. So it's very clear that Government of India, in its wisdom, is talking about Viksit Bharat in a broader term
Yeah.
than just restricting itself to per capita income.
Yeah.
And I think we economists have a role now, a bigger role to play, that we have to convince ourselves. How are we going to, on these 6 parameters which the government has now given the task to the economists? It's something like telling ISRO we want a man on the moon by this year, and ISRO is rising to the occasion. Similarly, telling the defense industry to do this, or telling the army generals, this is our target, we give you the freedom, now achieve it. I think the government has given the Indian economists a challenge that on these 6 parameters, we have to set the global standard and become fixed. It is our job now, we as economists, our job now to find out quantifiable parameters. In 22 years, we are able to achieve good school education, good health care, women in the workforce, we become the food basket, and no poverty in the country. It's our job. So I think it's a challenge on 15th of August today, which I think we economists and Indian Economic Associations, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, as many as they are, I think, who talk to different economists, bring them together, trade associations. Professor Mahendra Dev, now you are in the saddle. I must mention that the Viksit Bharat document, where different states are coming out, are so diverse. Obviously, you are right. They will converge, they should converge, and I think we will need a nudge from people like you at the helm of affairs. But as of now, they're so diverse. Of course, you can argue and say that different states, different specialties, different geographical locations, different challenges. So why do you want them to be, and we are a country which takes pride in diversity. You could say that, but I think some common minimum template would be required.
Yeah.
And I think to that extent, under your leadership, we economists need to work, give you the feedback so that at least there is some convergence. I'm thrilled with the idea and your research that there's convergence on social indicators.
Yeah.
So at least we now know that all states will converge on education, healthcare, longevity in life, and things like that. Today, Prime Minister mentioned in his speech about obesity. I think we need to now work on socioeconomic parameters, health indicators. You and me know that in North India, cancer is a very big issue. Kidney failure is another very big issue. Obesity is the Prime Minister speaking from the ramparts of red food must be an issue. That's why he's speaking about it. I think we have a real fantastic challenge at hand. And I hope if ISRO can put a man on the moon, we economists can bring India to Viksit Bharat status also. We need to rise to the occasion. And under your stewardship as chair of the EAC PM, I think we'll all like to work with you and achieve. Yeah. With that, I need to make two announcements in the housekeeping. You know, this has been a fascinating talk today. And I don't think we could have got better people to talk about it than what we have fortunately been able to bring them together. The recording will be available tomorrow by noon. So you're welcome to, I'll send you the link. It will be on our website. Welcome to use it the way you want. Next week, in our pursuit of learning from each other, we are going to be discussing Meghalaya, 22nd October. 29th, we are discussing about a fantastic book by Gurcharan Manna and CAR, 75 Years of the Indian National Sample Survey. And then on 5th of September, we are discussing foreign direct investment from INCO's World Bank report. And on 12th September, we are discussing Assam with Professor Bez Barua, who just asked a question. So I would like request you all, while we are learning from each other, please join us in this endeavor of the webinars which we are putting on Fridays together. Let me once again thank each one of you, the panelists and the chair and the participants who have been asking beautiful questions which are in the chat box. It's a long weekend and I know many people are everywhere. It's really thankful that you have all spent time with us today. Have a great weekend and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor.